Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Today's topic, I want to kind of go over your first lab and your first lab assignment. So let me get that pulled up for you. Maybe I shouldn't have 47 things open on my computer. Here we go. Okay, so our first lab is just kind of an intro to the scientific method and kind of understanding how to use, scientific writing when you do your results statements and things like that. We'll talk in greater detail about this when we get into our lab reports, and you'll be required to write in APA format and those types of things. Okay, I'm assuming that pretty much everyone in this class has already taken research methods. And if you haven't, I'm going to post some kind of background information as to how to do statistics on Excel. You've probably already learned how to do statistics on SPSS, and that is great as well. I don't care which you use for that, but I will kind of review those things as we go through this lab. So there's basically, I have 3 different questions in this lab. So the first question, pretty easy. So it gives you information about the study. You just need to identify the independent variable, the dependent variable, which statistical analysis should be run. Think about, is the experiment valid? Is it reliable? And explain in detail what those mean, and also why or why not. Is it valid? Is it reliable? Okay. What are 3 things that we could control in this particular experiment to improve validity and reliability? Okay. Let me scroll to the next one. Second question. Again, now I give you some actual data. So you do have to actually do a statistical analysis for the second one. So you need to write a results and conclusion statement. Also include that statistical analysis piece when you submit this as well. So you can kind of copy and paste that into your document. Okay. So in this particular example, we're looking at money spent on shoes in comparison to VO2 max. Again, I don't care which, if you use like Excel or if you use SPSS to do your analyses here. Okay. Again, the example Excel document that I'm going to provide for you will give you more information about how to write a results and conclusion statement. But basically, you're going to say X statistical analysis was run, and the results showed that the p-value was 0.03 or something like that. So therefore, we can, don't say we, therefore, researchers have found that there is a significant relationship between money spent on shoes and VO2 max levels. Your conclusion statement then applies that to like real life, right? What does that mean? So again, in your results statement, you want to include your p-value and whatever other statistical piece you have. For example, if you ran a t-test, you would want to include your t-value. If you ran an ANOVA, you would include the f. And if you did like a regression, for example, you would include the r value or the r squared value. Okay, so your conclusion statement, again, if you found that there was a significant difference, your conclusion statement might be something like, as the amount of money spent on shoes increases, the VO2 max also increased in these particular subjects, or something like that. Okay. The last question here, this one will take the most amount of time, I think. So kind of multi-layered here. It's a fairly complex scenario. So basically the researchers wanted to know exercise modes associated with improving blood pressure for people that have hypertension, okay? So one group was gonna do aerobic exercise, the other group wanted to do yoga, and we wanted to kind of compare and contrast these. So I set up something known as a crossover design, and this is not something that we talked about in that first lecture, so I wanted to kind of discuss that here. When we think about crossover design, notice that half of the groups, or half of the people, group A is going to do yoga first, and then they're going to do aerobic exercise second. Group B is going to do aerobic exercise first, followed by yoga second, okay? They're doing 8 weeks of each of these interventions. However, it's important that we create this crossover design. So half of the people are doing yoga first, half of the people are doing aerobic exercise first, and then they basically cross over, they switch groups, right? The reason that that's important is what if aerobic exercise then builds, and now you know, we're still seeing the positive benefits of that as they do yoga, right? Or maybe it's really any type of exercise causes improvements of blood pressure, so it doesn't matter the mode potentially. So again, learning effect and the effect of one intervention onto the other makes a difference, or can make a difference in the accuracy of your results. So that's what we're talking about when this is set up this way, so that it's a crossover design, okay? It improves the validity and reliability of your study. Additionally, your researchers wanted to understand what the effect of gender is, okay? So again, make sure you include some things in your paragraph down here about gender and blood pressure, and maybe you can find some studies that looked at female subjects that did aerobic exercise, or maybe you find something about male subjects that did yoga or whatever, okay? You could also look into exercise preference. Maybe it's true that, I'm just making this up, maybe it's true that females enjoy yoga more than males, okay? So again, thinking about those types of things, I want you to really think about this when you develop your intro paragraph. Make sure you're using scholarly sources in order to back up what you say, and then create an educated hypothesis based on what you know to be true, or what you find to be true when you do your research, not just like what's in your head, what you think might happen, as it relates to aerobic exercise, yoga, and then also gender and hypertension. Maybe there aren't any gender differences that you can find. If that's true, then list that in your assignment here, okay? Again, you're going to attach one abstract related to this topic that helped you to develop your hypothesis. This is just my way of making sure that you know what a scholarly source is, okay? Again, you've done lab reports in anatomy and phys, so that should be familiar for you. Again, like I said, almost all of you or all of you have already taken research methods, so you should know what a scholarly article is, but attach one abstract just so that I know for sure, okay? Identify your independent, dependent variables. Research design, we talked about this idea of crossover design, okay? So having two groups and having them switch, but also there's another classification kind of based on that PowerPoint that we did. Is it a cross-sectional? Is it longitudinal? Is it dose response? Okay, so choose one of those three. When you talk about research design, also list that it is a crossover, okay? So it can be crossover and something else. And then identify 3 controls that you can use to ensure validity and reliability, okay? So let me now pull up for you, if I can find, this Excel example thing that I was talking to you about that might be helpful for you. You only have to do 1 statistical analysis for this lab, but you will need to do more in the future. Let's see, what's it called? Copy of Excel worksheet. Okay, here we go, new share. Okay. So this is just a, what the heck? I don't care. This, you can see at the bottom here, it kind of goes through each type of analyses that you might want to run with Excel, okay? Again, there's a tutorial up here. It tells you how to do like your mean, median mode, standard deviation. You can do t-tests here. All that stuff's pretty simple. Gives you some examples as well. So here we've got mean, median mode examples for descriptive statistics for testosterone levels here, okay? And then each of these tabs tells us how to analyze a different thing, Okay, so what I want to do now is just kind of review with you again. If you feel comfortable with the different statistical analyses, then you can stop watching for now, right? That'll be good for this lab, but I do want to review those for those of you that are feeling a little uneasy or unsure about which statistical analyses to use in which scenarios, okay? So let's see. I'm going to do a little whiteboard action here. Okay. So again, we'll start with the two, I would say two different classifications. We can do t-tests. You know what would be better? If I just open a Word document, wouldn't that be better? Because I'm not going to be very good at writing. Okay, so I have t-tests and ANOVAs. Okay, when we think about t-tests, remember that there's two of something. With ANOVAs, there's three or more. Okay, what do I mean by two? It can either be 2 time points or 2 groups. Remember that the groups must be mutually exclusive. Okay, so if I am looking at blood pressure differences for males and females, know that I can only be a male or a female. I can only fit into one group. Okay, I can't be in both groups. With ANOVA, if I look at 3 or more, I'm going to do 3 or more time points, or I can do 3 or more mutually exclusive groups. Okay. So t-test, 2 time points. Let's say I wanted to know the difference in your, I don't know. This is where I would ask you for examples. 2 time points. I want to know the difference between your heart rate when you come to class and your heart rate after class. Okay, so again, I'm going to take one group of people and I'm going to compare your heart rate at the beginning of class and your heart rate at the end of class. Okay, with 2 time points, that's called a paired t-test. Okay. So again, it's paired because we're looking at the same people, comparing them to themselves at a different point in time. Okay. Another example of a paired t-test, maybe I wanted to know the strength level of our football players to see if they're improving throughout the season. So I'm going to do a 1RM bench press at the beginning of the season. I'm going to do a 1RM bench press at the end of their season. Again, that's a paired t-test because I'm comparing those individual subjects to themselves at a different time point. Okay, I can also do an unpaired t-test. And this is 2 mutually exclusive groups. Okay, so maybe I wanted to know if who's got a better vertical jump. Is it our women's basketball team or is it our women's volleyball team? Okay, now the only assumption I need to make in order for that statistical analysis to work is that there are no girls that are on both teams. Okay, and if there were, we would need to exclude them from one data set somehow. We would do that. Okay, so unpaired t-test, I'm comparing 2 different groups. So I can't be in 2 groups, right? So I'm only in one group. Each group is mutually exclusive. Okay. ANOVA, 3 or more time points. Maybe I wanted to know, I don't know, what do we want to know? We want to know, weight changes in pregnant women. Okay, so we want to measure their weight when they first get pregnant, their weight at the end of the first trimester, their weight at the end of the second trimester, their weight at the end of the 3rd trimester before delivery. Okay, so we're looking at 4 different time points in this example, but we're looking at that same group of people. We're going to follow that same cohort of people throughout their whole pregnancy to determine what the difference is in their, or determine if there is a difference in their weight or something along those lines. Okay, another example of 3 different time points. Maybe we want to know what your GPA is as you move through your career at Loras College. Okay, so in order for this to work, if I want to look at the same group, let's say I take the freshmen this year. Okay, I'm going to see what their GPA is at the end of their freshman year. Then I'm going to wait until the end of their sophomore year and find out what their GPA is. And then I'm going to wait and find out what their GPA is at the end of their junior year. And then I'm going to wait and find out what their GPA is at the end of their senior year. Okay. So I'm following the same group over time. So lots of times this is going to be a longitudinal study. And this is known as a repeated measures ANOVA. Oh, come on. There you go. Okay. And then we can do 3 or more exclusive groups. Okay, so maybe I want to know who has the best vertical jump. Which team on campus has the best vertical jump? Is it women's volleyball? Is it women's basketball? Is it men's volleyball? Is it men's basketball? Okay, so maybe I'm looking at those 4 groups. Again, I'm assuming that there's not one athlete that's on multiple of those teams in order for that to work. But I'm going to measure all athletes one time in that particular scenario. And that's known as a single factor ANOVA. Okay. So the next 2 categories that we can look at are correlation and regression. And these are very often confused with each other. So I want to spend a couple minutes kind of differentiating between the 2 of these. Okay. So a correlation is usually observational. Okay, so I am simply observing. I'm not providing a treatment or anything else like that. I want to observe if there's a relationship between 2 variables. Okay, so maybe one thing that I'm interested in is understanding motivation levels for students and their food choices. Okay, so maybe I ask them, you know, to identify how motivated they are to eat healthy and compare that to what their body weight is. Okay, so my 2 variables are motivation level and body weight. Okay. Again, I didn't provide them with motivation. I don't provide them with anything. Like there's not actually an intervention or anything going on. I'm simply observing to see if there's a relationship between these 2 factors. Okay. Does one cause the other, or does the one, you know what I mean? So does my motivation to eat healthy cause me to have a low body weight, or is having a low body weight motivating me to eat healthy, right? So there's not a clear independent or dependent variable when we do a correlational study or analysis. Okay. Another example of a good correlational study would be to compare people's happiness levels with their income. Okay, so again, I'm going to ask people, what's your happiness level? Maybe there's like some sort of scale from like 1 to 100 or something like that. And then how much money do you make? Okay, again, is having a lot of money making you happy, or are you happy and so therefore you're successful in your work, right? So there's not a clear independent or dependent variable with a correlational study. Okay, a regression, I do have a clear independent and dependent variable. Okay, so we do have a clear variable that, or a control piece, and then something that we want to measure. Regression is like my favorite thing to do. This is like what I do mostly in my research. But I like to use this because you can create a predictive equation. Let me give you an example. Okay, so I could measure everybody's VO2 max levels and then use that information to predict how fast you might be able to run a 5K race. Okay, so we could look at VO2. Oh, come on. We can look at VO2 max and 5K race time. Okay, so VO2 max is our independent variable, and then we're looking to see what the, what the relationship is there with the dependent variable as 5K time. Okay, so we want to know if we could predict our 5K time based on what their VO2 max was. Okay, so we measure this, that's our independent, and then dependent would be the 5K time. Okay, so again, these predictive equations I think are super neato. They can give us some information about, how to predict somebody's athletic performance, which is what I care about. So something like that would be interesting. We could also look at like, I don't know, grit score and push-ups to failure. Okay, so grit score would be, I don't know if you've heard of grit before, the grit scale, but it's basically looking at somebody's like, people that are gritty are not going to quit. They're not going to give up, right? So they have a high amount of passion and perseverance that lasts a long time. So if I'm very gritty, if I'm a gritty person, am I able to do more push-ups? Am I able to push myself further and not give up, right? So again, independent variable would be this grit score, and then push-ups to failure would be my dependent variable. Okay, so that's basically what a regression is. The statistical analysis for either of these is not different. It's basically the same analyses. It's just a matter of appreciating whether this is observational or whether we have a clear independent and dependent variable. Okay, I think that's pretty much it that you need to know for this class for statistical analyses. With ANOVAs, we can certainly run what's known as a post hoc analysis. So if there is a significant difference between your groups, it doesn't tell us which group there is significant difference between. Again, that's not necessarily in the scope of this class. We can do a variety of tests in order to figure out which group is significantly different. For purposes in this class, again, this isn't a statistics class. Just do your best to kind of eyeball the averages for each of those groups, and we can kind of do that. So anyway, I think that's pretty much it for this first lab. So you've got, let's see, if you're watching this and it's August 31st, you have until September 4th to complete this lab homework and drop it in the eLearn Dropbox. So you have this week to kind of work on that. On Wednesday, September 2nd, you do have a quiz that'll be on eLearn, and it will cover the scientific method and kind of that introductory lecture that we completed on Friday, the August 28th. So please make sure you get those things done. And as mentioned, let me know if you do have any questions as you're working on this homework, right? We have a great day.